Hello everyone, this is Gabriel Sansão and this is Schelling Tube. I'm still working with the system of Transcendental Idealism, which is volume 9, part 1 of the series 1 of the historical critical edition of Schelling's works. Well, we are working on the introduction of this work. It's a very hard text, complicated, and nonetheless it's quite interesting and it's, how could one say, thought-provoking. Well, Schelling develops the idea that philosophy must have a starting point. It starts either from the objective, nature, or from the subjective, the intelligence or the consciousness. To Schelling, philosophy must start from consciousness in order to supplement or to solve some of the problems and insufficiencies that the point of view of consciousness has. It's this idea of a path of consciousness toward its integration with nature, the integration with objective and subjective. So for Schelling there are two fundamental sciences. The term he uses for fundamental science is Grundwissenschaft. There is transcendental philosophy and nature philosophy or philosophy of nature. So those two philosophies are the fundamental philosophies, and they are able to join themselves, forming philosophy as a whole. But to join themselves, one of them must go to the other. They can't start simultaneously toward one another. This is what Victor Huxley criticizes. Why can't they do that? Schelling doesn't explain that, according to Huxley. And I find it an interesting criticism of Huxley's. But well, let's see Schelling's arguments first and see if we agree or not with him. Then we can see maybe later Huxley's criticisms in a more throughout way. Well, so in the second paragraph of the introduction, we are on page 32 of the historical critical edition. Schelling mentions this that I just said. There are two fundamental sciences that are initially contraposed to one another, transcendental philosophy and philosophy of nature, but this contraposition is just, or this opposition is just a starting situation that we don't have access, to which we don't have immediate access. It is just something we can reconstruct. In our philosophical experience, we don't see this opposition, but Schelling tries to retrace that, to see the path of consciousness. It's something that was quite popular at the time. Fichte was, I believe, the first one to do that in his doctrine of science, or science of knowledge, the Wissenschaftslehre, in its many versions. Schelling did this in his system of transcendental idealism, and 6 years later, Hegel did this in his phenomenology of spirit or phenomenology of mind, depending on the translation. German idealists wanted to see the path of consciousness toward the self-consciousness, toward the identity between subject and object, as a way to justify knowledge. It may sound strange for us, but it was something important in that context. And it's interesting. How can we be certain of the most certain form of knowledge, the knowledge of ourselves? That's interesting and bold, I would say. But anyhow, returning to Schelling's text, it's starting from the subjective consciousness, the representant, the intelligence, that one questions the reality of the objectivity, of the objective world. This is something that we see in the whole history of modern philosophy, right? In Descartes, in Kant. And one immediate certainty for the use of reason is the certainty of one's self. I am. Beyond the certainty of the self-consciousness, the issue is already more complex. The proposition that there are things that lie outside us is only valid regarding its identity with the proposition I am. And to the transcendental philosopher, being certain of things outside us is nothing but a prejudice that he crosses in order to search its own source. The transcendental philosopher, therefore, doesn't demonstrate things in themselves, but he assures us that it is a necessary prejudice to take objects as effective in order to search for knowledge. And he has to start from the transcendental point of view, he has to start from the self-certainty and then to establish an analogy that there is an external world, the certainty of external objects. So the transcendental philosopher only has originally a subjective reality, and he will take only subjective in his knowledge as an immediate object. Transcendental thinking breaks with the mechanism according to which concepts are sovereign. Transcendental thinking becomes aware of the concepts not as things but as actions of consciousness. Schelling uses this expression that becoming aware of concepts as actions, the transcendental thinking raises itself to the concept of concepts. Schelling uses the expression Begriff des Begriffs. It's the concept of concepts. Transcendental philosophizing, the transcendental way of doing philosophy, is an action, is an act. Not only an act, it also is at the same time a self-contemplation in this action. In the transcendental way of considering objects, what flows in all the actions, thinking or knowing, is absolutely non-objective, but brought to consciousness, thus becoming objective. It is a way of making the objective become objective through subjectivity. It's very interesting. It's an inheritge of Fichtean's transcendental philosophy, and we will see more about that. Schelling calls this the transcendental craft, or transcendental art. Art in the sense of ingenuity, of a craft. Transcendentale Kunst. And the Transcendentale Kunst lies in the following: keeping aware of the duplicity of acting and thinking without modifying it. I hope you guys have enjoyed it, and in a couple of weeks we'll be back. I'll see you.